Okay, so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to go over the answer key to the midterm exam that you guys took over the last week or so. So the first question is meant to be very tricky. So it's meant to be probably one of the more difficult questions that you've ever had to answer. Okay, so don't, if you missed points or if you got things wrong on it, don't feel terrible. It's meant to be tough. Okay, so what this question is asking is whether or not demand for automobiles is inelastic or elastic, or since I include uncertain as a potential answer, whether or not if you don't have enough information. Okay, and so the trick here is that you actually do have enough information to tell. Okay, so on January 5th, 1914, Henry Ford implemented the $5 a day plan, where he paid his workers $5 a day. Okay. As a result of this, people lined up around the block to come work for him. The resulting success of this plan and the booming success of the city of Detroit in the decades to follow suggest that demand for automobiles was inelastic. True, false, or uncertain? And the answer is actually false. Okay, so for number one, the answer is false. Okay, and what it does is it suggests that demand for automobiles was actually elastic. Okay, and what we know from class is that labor demand depends crucially upon, so labor demand depends on MVP, your marginal value product. Okay, and so when Henry Ford offered such a high wage, what he was effectively doing was betting that while he'd be charging a lower price for his automobiles, right, which says that supply, right, he's saying that the supply of automobiles is going to increase because he's going to use some new technology or some new production technique that's more productive. Okay, so he's saying he's going to be more productive under this plan than under other plans. Okay, and so while he's charging a lower price for his automobiles than his competitors were, his workers would be able to churn out significantly more cars than they previously could, which is basically saying that the demand curve must actually be very elastic. So a small change in the supply curve results in an increase in supply, results in a small change in price relative to the change in the quantity that was sold. Okay? And if that's true, if the demand is elastic, then actually a technological improvement that makes the workers' marginal physical product improve or increase would increase their marginal value product as well. Okay, so remember, so here we're just saying the workers are going to be more productive, so MPP increased. Under what conditions does MVP increase when MPP increases? Well, it's got to be when demand for the final good, in this case automobiles, is elastic. So number one actually gives you enough information to figure it out. Okay. Number two, another true, false, uncertain, and explain problem. So suppose that someone tells you that they wish they could afford to take more time off so that they could spend more time with their family, and the next day they get a big promotion which increases their hourly wage dramatically and also their income. As a result of this, they work more hours than they used to. As an economist, you conclude that the substitution effect was larger than the income effect. Okay, so remember, the substitution effect, says higher pay, work more. And the income effect says more money, less work. Okay, and so we know these two things. This is straight from the notes, and we know that both his hourly wage is going up, and as a result, his salary or his income goes up as well. And so the question is, which one of these is bigger? Well, we know the total effect is positive, right? And so it must be the case that the substitution is bigger than income, which is saying he's working more, right? He's working more hours more than he's working less hours because of his income, right? So we know that that has to be the case. So the answer to number 2 is true. Okay. Let's go down to number 3. All right. So for number 3, right, productivity growth in one industry, for example, the orange industry, can lead to an increase in the unemployment rate within that industry if wages are unable to adjust downward. Okay, so there's a lot of moving parts in this problem. Okay, and this one, the answer is uncertain. All right, which means it could go either way, and it depends on certain other things. But I include in the answer key, it's uncertain, but likely to be false. Okay, and so what we need to know is under what conditions will more people be employed in the industry after productivity growth. So productivity growth is equal to an increase in MPP, right? So we've just increased the marginal physical product of workers, and as a result, they're more productive, right? And so what we want to know is under what conditions will labor demand increase, and under what conditions will labor demand decrease, right? So labor demand will increase if the demand for the product is elastic, and labor demand will decrease if demand for the product is inelastic. Okay, so that can shift employment figures around. Okay, but the other thing to consider is that the unemployment rate is a very particular. Hang on. Let me see if I can't make this better. The unemployment rate is calculated by the number of unemployed divided by the labor force, right? Well, the labor force might be changing, right, as a result of this. So let's say that the demand for the product is highly inelastic, right, and worker productivity grows, okay? So labor demand decreases, resulting in fewer workers finding jobs in that industry. Okay, we understand that so far. But what is that going to do to the unemployment rate within that industry? Okay, and so for that, we need to know what's going on with the number of unemployed people. Maybe those people, seeing some of the current workers lose their jobs, maybe those people will stop looking for work in this case in the orange industry, and they'll go look in some other industry instead. Well, that might actually decrease the unemployment rate. Even though more people are now unemployed in the orange industry, it might actually decrease, or let me rephrase that. Even though more people or fewer people are working in the orange industry, it could be the case that the unemployment rate within that industry decreases if all the unemployed people go and look for a job somewhere else, right? And so there's two things that introduce uncertainty. The first one is whether or not demand for the product is elastic or inelastic. And then the second one is what this change in labor demand will do to the number of unemployed people in that industry. Okay, so there's lots of moving parts in there, so the point is it's uncertain and it depends on these two things. Okay, let's get a new sheet of paper for number 4. So number 4, suppose that without any warning, President Obama signs an executive order mandating a $20 federal minimum wage rate effective immediately, and the Supreme Court instantly says this is cool, right? Explain what would likely happen in the short run, say over the next 3 months, and what would happen over the long run, say after 1 year. Would such a policy benefit low-skill or high-skill workers? Okay, and so in the very short run, such as the first 3 months after this policy's enactment, low-skill workers might actually benefit, right? They might actually benefit from this policy in the form of higher wages, right? The business owner, remember, in the short run, businesses can't really change how they're producing their products, right? They can't fluctuate between labor and capital hardly at all. And so if the minimum wage rises, well, it's probable that they'll either lay everybody off or they'll have to just suck it up and pay higher wages. Okay, but in the long run, right? In the long run, when firms are able to hire machines instead of workers, we'll actually see them do that. We'll see them switch to hiring capital. Okay, and so in the long run, firms will switch to hiring machines. So short run, right? Either everyone loses their job because firm shuts down or exits, right? Or low skill benefits. In the long run, firms hire machines instead of low skilled. Okay, so in the long run, firms will definitely hire machines. So everyone got the long run thing right. And most people got the short run stuff right. You either said that people will lose their jobs because unemployment does, raising the minimum wage does increase the unemployment rate. But it might also just not affect the firms all that much in their hiring decisions, at least for the next, for the very short run. Okay. As for who benefits from this policy, well, initially, low-skilled workers are likely to benefit if they keep their jobs, right? At least for the short run, okay? But over time, high-skilled workers will actually benefit. Remember that low-skill and high-skill workers are substitutes, and as the price of a substitute rises, demand for the other good will rise in turn, right? And so in this case, the rise in the price of a low-skill worker increases the demand for a high-skilled worker. And so this is actually, if you think about it, this is why a lot of high-skilled workers will argue for an increase in the minimum wage, right? Because it lets them both sound egalitarian, like they're trying to help their fellow man out, but it also increases their salary, right? Because it makes their competitors more expensive, and as a result, it makes them more expensive. And so, it's a double-edged sword there, but who knows? Number 5. Number 5 was a math problem. Most people got this right, so. Suppose that a firm currently requires 800 labor hours, that the current wage rate is $10 per hour, and that overtime pay begins at 40 hours. Suppose that the firm wants to avoid paying people overtime pay, right? So how many workers will the firm hire, and what will be their total wage bill? Okay, so we have 800 hours that have to be worked, and then we want to divide that by 40 hours per worker, because we want to avoid putting people at overtime. So we put them right at 40 hours. That gives us 20 workers. Okay, and these 20 workers, so we're having 800 hours of work times $10 per hour, and that will be equal to $8,000. Okay, so here the firm hires 20 workers and they spend $8,000 on wages. Okay, for part B. Now we're supposing that in an effort to help these people, Congress passes a law mandating that overtime pay begin at 20 hours per week instead. Suppose that the firm does not change its hiring practice at all. What will the new wage bill be? Okay, so each worker will have 20 hours at $10 per hour, and 20 hours at time and a half, which is $15 per hour. Okay, and so each worker will get 20 times 10 plus 20 times 15, which is equal to $500 per worker. And then we multiply $500 times 20 workers to get $10,000. All right, so $10,000 becomes the new wage bill. Each worker is getting $500. Okay, and then part C was where a lot of people got tripped up. Got a lot of people answering 16. Okay, and I can't remember how you got that. I don't have my sheet where I worked it out. So I'm sorry, but I think I explained it in your comment, in the answers in your comments. And if I didn't, just shoot me an email and I'll email you back right away. Okay, but for this one, part C, if the firm could costlessly find new employees to hire, what would be the minimum number of employees that they would want to hire as a result of the new policy if they wanted to minimize their wage bill? Okay, so to avoid paying overtime, they can only have their workers work 20 hours per week now. Okay, and so what we do is we say 800 hours divided by 20 hours per worker, and that will give us 40 workers. And now I have 40 workers working. They're going to work 20 hours per worker, right? And they're going to work for $10 per hour. Okay, cancel, 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 and that gets us to $8,000. Okay, so part C, they hire 40 workers, and their wage bill is back down to $8,000. I'm sorry, this is number 5. Yeah, 5C. Okay, and then the last one is a somewhat difficult question. Okay, so 6. A recent GMAC study finds that people with an MBA earn, on average, approximately $30,000 more per year than people who do not have an MBA. Seeing this, Congress mandates that every 4-year business school require its students to enroll in an MBA program immediately following graduation, and also provides full funding for those students provided that the university granting the MBA maintains a 100% graduation rate. Doing this, Congress says, quote, will promote a more educated and therefore more productive workforce. Using what we have read about in class, is Congress correct? What would be the likely response by employers to such a policy? Would you recommend that Congress pursue such a policy? Why or why not? Okay. Now, just like I do in the answer key online, let me begin and say that, look, there are lots of answers to this question, okay? And you should consult your particular exam and the comments that I left for a detailed explanation of your answer, okay? So here's the way I answered this, okay? This is one of many. There's lots of correct answers, okay? One very likely effect is that the signal sent by obtaining an MBA would almost entirely disappear. Okay? If everyone has one, then it's no longer that special to have one, right? Just like how a bachelor's degree isn't all that special today compared to what it was 50 years ago, right? And so the key here is not the increased supply. Everyone focuses on the increased supply, but it has nothing to do with a change in the supply of people with a bachelor's degree, because one, it's an increase in the quantity supplied of bachelor's degrees. But anyway, so it's not an increase in supply, it's a decreased ability of businesses to learn something useful from seeing that you've completed an MBA, right? Remember, like, the most valuable part about the college experience is not what you learn in the classroom, it's actually getting the shiny piece of paper at the end. Right, that's the valuable thing. If you read the Brian Kaplan piece a few weeks ago in the lecture on signaling, you saw this. Okay, and so as a result of this, employers would be more likely to do one of several things. Right, maybe they'd require a different degree, maybe a master's of public administration, or a different master's degree, such as a master's in economics. Right. Or maybe they could rely more heavily on internal labor markets and promote from within. Right? There's lots of different responses that the employers could have. As a result of this, I personally strongly recommend that Congress abandon this policy. This does not stem from some thought that some people deserve to go and others don't. That's not what I'm saying. And I certainly don't want to deny people the opportunity to pursue their MBA, right? But what I am worried about is the effect that this would have on employers' ability to figure out things about their employees or their potential employees. Okay, some people wrote things like, "This means that employers are going to have to pay their workers more because everyone's going to have an MBA," right? But like an MBA does not improve your marginal value product, and as a result, it's not the same. It's not. You don't get paid more because you have a degree. Okay? You get paid more because you're more productive, and the degree is supposed to be a signal that proves or at least provides evidence that you are more productive, right? So it's not the degree that gets you paid more, right? It's the productivity that gets you paid more, and the degree is sort of a certificate that says you are more productive, okay? So it has nothing to do with, it has very little to do with the degree. It has everything to do with signaling your underlying traits, okay? So there's lots of answers to this. Go check your individual answers on Blackboard. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email, and we can set up a time to meet and go over your exam if you like, okay? All right.